The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Buckingham Palace. Tourists from every corner of the world gathered behind the iron gates, cameras ready, eager to witness the famous changing of the guard ceremony. Among them stood Marcus Pemberton, a real estate mogul from New York City, dressed in an expensive Italian suit that probably cost more than most people earned in a month. His designer sunglasses reflected the palace's grand facade, and his polished leather shoes clicked impatiently against the stones. Marcus had made his fortune buying and selling luxury properties in Manhattan. He was used to getting what he wanted when he wanted it. People jumped at his commands, doors opened for him, rules bent in his direction. At 52 years old, he had cultivated an air of superiority that followed him like an expensive cologne. This trip to London was just another checkbox on his list of places the wealthy should visit, not because he cared about history or culture, but because it looked good on social media. Standing next to him was his much younger girlfriend, Cassandra, a model he had met at a charity gala 3 months ago. She was taking selfies, trying to capture the perfect angle with the palace in the background. Marcus barely noticed her. His attention was fixed on the royal guards standing at attention near the palace entrance. He had heard about these guards, how they stood perfectly still, never breaking character, no matter what tourists did to try to get a reaction. "They're like statues," Marcus muttered to Cassandra, a smirk playing on his lips. "So let's see how professional they really are." Cassandra glanced at him nervously. "Marcus, don't do anything stupid. These people take their traditions seriously." He waved her off dismissively. "Relax. I'm just going to have some fun. When you're at my level, sweetheart, you learn that rules are for ordinary people." Among the guards on duty that morning was Sergeant James Whitmore, a 28-year-old soldier who had served in the British Army for 10 years. James came from a military family. His grandfather had fought in World War II, his father had served in the Falklands, and his older brother was currently deployed overseas. For James, wearing the iconic red tunic and bearskin hat wasn't just a job or a tourist attraction, it was an honor, a responsibility, and a connection to centuries of British military tradition. And James had been stationed at various posts throughout his career, including a tour in Afghanistan that had taught him the true meaning of discipline and sacrifice. He had seen combat, lost friends, and learned that duty often meant standing firm when everything inside you wanted to react. The tourists, who giggled and waved at him, had no idea what he had been through. They saw a costume, a photo opportunity. They didn't see the man who had carried wounded comrades under fire, who had written letters to the families of fallen soldiers, who had learned to control his emotions so completely that standing still for hours in front of gawking crowds was almost meditative. The ceremony was about to begin. The guard company assembled in their precise formations, their movements synchronized like clockwork. Drums began to beat, and creating a rhythm that had echoed through these same courtyards for generations. The crowd pressed closer to the gates, phones and cameras raised high. Marcus saw his opportunity. The barriers were designed to keep tourists at a respectful distance, but there was a small gap where the crowd had pushed forward. Without hesitation, he squeezed through, ignoring the protests of other tourists and the warning shouts of the police officers stationed nearby. "Sir, you need to step back," a female officer called out, moving toward him. Marcus ignored her, walking directly toward where James stood at attention. His expensive shoes echoed on the stones. Other tourists gasped, some excited to see what would happen, others embarrassed on his behalf. Cassandra called his name, but he didn't turn around. James saw Marcus approaching in his peripheral vision. His training kicked in immediately. Do not move, do not react, eyes forward, breathing steady. He had dealt with difficult tourists before, people who got too close, who tried to make him laugh, who touched his uniform. He had learned to treat them like weather, something to endure until it passed. Marcus stopped directly in front of James, so close that James could smell the man's cologne mixed with the scent of alcohol on his breath. It was barely 10 in the morning, but Marcus had clearly been drinking. The businessman looked James up and down, a sneer forming on his face. "Look at you," Marcus said loudly, ensuring nearby tourists could hear. "All dressed up like a toy soldier. You know what you are? You're just a prop for tourists like me. Entertainment. I no different than the guys who dress up as characters in Times Square." James's jaw tightened slightly, but his expression remained neutral. His eyes stayed fixed on a point in the distance, looking through Marcus rather than at him. The police officer was closing in now, speaking firmly into her radio for backup. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time to step back behind the barrier." Marcus spun around to face her. "Do you know who I am? I've donated more money to charitable causes in 1 year than you'll make in your entire career. I'm a taxpayer, a job creator. These guards are paid with public money, which means they work for me." "Sir, that's not how this works," the officer replied, her patience wearing thin. "You're disrupting an official ceremony and violating clearly posted regulations." "Regulations?" Marcus laughed, or turning back to James. "You hear that, soldier boy? Regulations. Let me tell you something about regulations. They're made by small-minded people for small-minded people." Then, before anyone could react, Marcus did something that would change everything. He leaned forward and spat directly onto James's perfectly polished boot. The crowd gasped collectively. Several people screamed. Cassandra covered her mouth in horror. The police officer's hand went immediately to her radio, calling for immediate assistance. Tourists who had been filming caught the entire incident on their phones. James felt the wetness hit his boot. Every muscle in his body wanted to react, wanted to move, wanted to respond to this profound disrespect. His hands, hidden by his position of attention, clenched into fists. His heart rate increased. Adrenaline flooded his system, the same chemical response he had felt under enemy fire, but he controlled it, channeled it, refused to let it control him. Marcus stood there, triumphant, expecting some kind of reaction. When none came, he laughed again, louder this time. "See? Just a statue. Just a—" He didn't get to finish his sentence. 3 police officers arrived simultaneously, moving with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, Marcus's arms were behind his back, handcuffs clicking into place. His expensive sunglasses fell to the ground, the lens cracking against the cobblestones. "You're under arrest for assault on a member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces, public disorder, and disrespect to a royal guard," the lead officer stated, her voice firm and professional. "Assault?" Marcus sputtered, his arrogance finally cracking. "Oh, I barely touched him. Do you know who I am? I'm Marcus Pemberton. I'll have your job for this. I'll sue the entire London police force." "You have the right to remain silent," the officer continued, unmoved by his threats. "I suggest you use it." As Marcus was led away, still shouting threats and demands, Cassandra stood frozen behind the barrier, tears streaming down her face. She had warned him. She had told him not to do anything stupid. But Marcus never listened. Marcus never thought consequences applied to him. James remained at attention throughout the entire incident. Not a muscle moved. His eyes stayed forward. His breathing remained steady. To the casual observer, it was as if nothing had happened at all. But inside, James was processing what had just occurred. He had been disrespected in the worst possible way, in front of thousands of tourists, while performing a duty he held sacred. Yet he had maintained his discipline. He had honored his uniform and his country by refusing to lower himself to Marcus's level. The ceremony continued. The guards marched, the drums beat, the crowd watched and photographed. But the incident had shifted something in the atmosphere. Tourists looked at the guards with new eyes, with more respect. with a deeper appreciation for the discipline it took to stand there, to endure whatever came, to represent something larger than oneself. Later, in the security office where Marcus was being processed, reality began to set in. The officers took his passport, documented his personal information, and explained the charges against him. Assault on a military service member in the United Kingdom carried serious penalties, especially when it occurred during an official ceremony at a royal residence. "I want to speak to the American embassy," Marcus demanded, his voice less confident now. "I want a lawyer. This is ridiculous. It was just spit. I didn't punch him or anything." The processing officer, a veteran constable named Davies, who had seen his share of entitled tourists over the years, looked up from his paperwork. "Assault isn't defined by the severity of the physical contact, Mr. Pemberton. It's defined by the unlawful application of force to another person. What you did was assault. Moreover, you did it to a member of the armed forces while they were on duty, which carries enhanced penalties." "Enhanced penalties? For spitting?" "For assaulting a soldier, sir. For disrespecting a royal guard. For disrupting an official ceremony. For creating a public disturbance. Shall I continue?" Marcus slumped in his chair, the weight of his actions finally beginning to register. His phone had been taken during the arrest, so he couldn't call his lawyer, couldn't check his social media, couldn't start doing damage control. He was just a man in a cell, facing consequences he had never imagined would apply to him. Meanwhile, back at the palace, James's commanding officer, Captain Richard Morrison, approached him after the ceremony concluded. Morrison was a decorated officer who had served alongside some of the finest soldiers in the British Army. He recognized true discipline when he saw it. "Sergeant Whitmore," Morrison said quietly. "A word, please." James followed his captain to a private area away from the tourists and other guards. Once they were alone, Morrison's formal demeanor softened slightly. "I saw what happened out there," Morrison said. "What that tourist did was completely unacceptable, and he'll face the full consequences of his actions. But I want you to know that your conduct was exemplary. Lesser men would have broken position. You honored your uniform and your country today." "Thank you, sir," James replied, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. "I was just doing my duty." "No," Morrison corrected him gently. "You were exceeding your duty. There's a difference between following orders and embodying the principles those orders represent. You embodied something important today, Sergeant. Never forget that." As James returned to the barracks to change out of his ceremonial uniform, he thought about his grandfather, about the stories of soldiers who had stood firm under much worse than spit. He thought about his brother deployed overseas, facing real danger every day. He thought about the young soldiers he was training, who would look to him as an example of what it meant to serve with honor. The incident with Marcus Pemberton was already spreading online. Videos from multiple angles showed the wealthy tourist spitting on the guard's boot, showed the immediate arrest, showed Marcus being led away in handcuffs while shouting threats. The videos were being shared thousands of times per minute, spreading across continents, generating millions of views. People were outraged. Comments flooded in from around the world, condemning Marcus's actions, praising the guard's discipline, and demanding that he face serious consequences. The story was picked up by news outlets, first in the UK, then internationally. Within hours, Marcus Pemberton's name was trending worldwide, but not in the way he had ever imagined. Marcus sat alone in the holding cell, staring at the gray concrete walls that seemed to close in around him with each passing hour. The cell smelled of disinfectant and desperation, a far cry from the penthouse suites and first-class lounges he was accustomed to. His expensive suit was wrinkled now, his silk tie loosened and askew. For the first time in decades, Marcus Pemberton felt truly powerless. His phone had been confiscated, sealed in a plastic evidence bag along with his wallet, watch, and other personal items. Without it, he felt naked, disconnected from the digital empire he had built. He couldn't call his lawyers. He couldn't check how his stocks were performing, couldn't control the narrative of what was happening to him. In the silence of the cell, with nothing but his thoughts, reality was becoming impossible to ignore. Across London, in a modest apartment in Camden, James Whitmore sat with his girlfriend Emily Chen, a primary school teacher he had been dating for 2 years. Emily had seen the videos online before James even made it home. She had watched, heart in her throat, as some arrogant tourist spat on the man she loved, knowing James couldn't defend himself, couldn't move, couldn't react. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, holding his hand across their small kitchen table. "Really okay?" James was quiet for a moment, staring at the cup of tea she had made him. "I've been spat at before," he said finally. "Not like that. Not during a ceremony, but in Afghanistan, when we'd patrol through hostile villages. People who saw us as invaders, as enemies. I understood their anger even if I didn't agree with it. But today," he paused, searching for words. "Today it was different. That man didn't hate me. He didn't even see me as a person. I was just an object to him, something to amuse himself with." Emily squeezed his hand. "Everyone online is supporting you. The videos are everywhere. People are calling you a hero for not reacting." "I'm not a hero," James said quietly. "Heroes are the guys who don't come home. I just stood there." "You did more than stand there," Emily insisted. "You showed dignity. You showed what real strength looks like. Not shouting, not fighting, just being better than him." James appreciated her words, but the incident still bothered him in ways he couldn't fully articulate. It wasn't the physical act of being spat on. He had endured worse. It was the casual cruelty of it, the assumption that his dignity was worthless, that the uniform he wore with such pride was just a costume. Meanwhile, at the police station, Marcus was finally allowed to make his phone call. He dialed his attorney, Gerald Finch, a sharp lawyer who specialized in making wealthy people's problems disappear. The phone rang 3 times before Gerald answered. "Marcus? Where the hell are you? Your face is all over the internet." "I'm in a London police station," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady. "They arrested me for spitting on a guard at Buckingham Palace. It's ridiculous, Gerald. I need you to make this go away." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You did what?" "It was just spit, Gerald. It's not like I hit the guy. They're treating me like I committed murder." "Marcus, do you have any idea what you've done?" Gerald's voice was strained. "The British take their military very seriously. You didn't just spit on some random person. You spat on a royal guard during an official ceremony at the Queen's residence. This isn't a traffic ticket I can make disappear." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you're in serious trouble. Real trouble. The kind of trouble that money might not fix." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had never heard Gerald sound so worried. "Can you get me out of here?" "I can try to arrange bail, but Marcus, you need to understand something. This is going to follow you. The videos are everywhere. Your business partners have already been calling my office asking for statements. Your board of directors is meeting tomorrow to discuss your position with the company. This is a disaster." After the call ended, Marcus was led back to his cell. His mind raced with the implications of what Gerald had said. His board was meeting about his position. That meant they were considering removing him as CEO, the position he had fought for, the company he had built from nothing. All because of one stupid moment. Back at Buckingham Palace, Captain Morrison was meeting with his superiors, including Colonel Patrick Henley, who oversaw ceremonial duties for the Royal Guard. The incident with Marcus had created a diplomatic situation that extended beyond simple military discipline. "The American Embassy has been in touch," Colonel Henley said, leaning back in his leather chair. They're concerned about one of their citizens being arrested. With all due respect, sir, he assaulted one of our soldiers, Morrison replied firmly. On camera, in front of thousands of witnesses, the evidence is irrefutable. I agree completely, Henley said, but we need to be prepared for this to escalate. The media is already running with it. Questions are being asked in Parliament. The palace itself has taken an interest. This isn't just about one tourist anymore, it's become a symbol. A symbol of what, sir? Of how we're perceived. Of whether our traditions still command respect. Of whether discipline and honor still mean something in a world where everyone has a camera and an opinion. Henley stood and walked to the window, looking out over the palace grounds. Sergeant Whitmore's conduct was impeccable. He maintained his composure under circumstances that would have broken lesser men. We need to ensure that gets recognized. The next morning, James woke to find himself at the center of a media storm he never wanted. News crews were camped outside the barracks, hoping for an interview. His phone was flooded with messages from journalists, from old friends he hadn't spoken to in years, from complete strangers offering support or asking for his story. The attention was overwhelming and uncomfortable. His commanding officer called him in for another meeting. Sergeant, the Ministry of Defense would like you to do a press conference. Nothing major. Just a brief statement thanking people for their support and reaffirming the values of the regiment. James shook his head. Sir, with respect, I'd rather not. I was just doing my job. I don't need recognition for it. Morrison smiled slightly. I told them you'd say that. But James, this is bigger than you now. Those videos have been viewed over 50 million times. You've become a symbol of military discipline and British values. Sometimes being a soldier means facing things we're not comfortable with for the greater good. James understood what his captain was saying, even if he didn't like it. Part of serving was representing something larger than yourself, even when it meant stepping into the spotlight you'd rather avoid. In the holding cell, Marcus was finally granted bail after his lawyers worked through the night. The amount was substantial, enough to make even a wealthy man wince, and came with strict conditions. He had to surrender his passport, report to the police station daily, and was forbidden from leaving London until his trial. As he walked out of the police station, he was met by a mob of reporters and photographers. Mr. Pemberton, do you regret what you did? Will you apologize to the guard? Is it true your company is considering removing you as CEO? Have you spoken to your family about this? Marcus pushed through the crowd, his lawyer running interference, and climbed into a waiting car. But there was no escape from what he had done. His phone, returned to him with his other belongings, was filled with notifications. Hundreds of them, thousands. His daughter, Rebecca, a college student at NYU, had sent him a long message expressing her shame and embarrassment. His ex-wife had sent a curt text saying she wasn't surprised. His business partners were distancing themselves. Sponsors who had supported his charity golf tournament were pulling out. The hotel where he was staying had asked him to check out due to security concerns. Most devastating was the email from his board of directors. It was formal, legal, and devastating. They were placing him on immediate administrative leave, pending a full review of his conduct and its impact on the company's reputation. The company he had built, the empire he had created, was slipping through his fingers. Cassandra had already flown back to New York. She had sent him a brief text message. I can't be associated with this. I'm sorry. Lose my number. Even she, who had been by his side at charity galas and business dinners, wanted nothing to do with him now. That evening, James stood before a small group of reporters at a Ministry of Defense press facility. He wore his service uniform, medals earned in combat displayed on his chest. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture perfect, his expression neutral. Captain Morrison stood nearby, offering silent support. The questions came quickly, but James answered them with the same discipline he had shown at the palace. How did you maintain your composure when that man spat on you? Training and respect for the uniform I wear. It's not about me as an individual. It's about what I represent. Do you think the punishment he's facing is appropriate? That's for the courts to decide. I'm a soldier, not a judge. What would you say to people who see you as a hero? James paused at this question, choosing his words carefully. I'm not a hero. Real heroes are the men and women serving in dangerous places around the world right now, putting their lives on the line for something bigger than themselves. I was just doing my duty. That's what soldiers do. The brief press conference was over in 15 minutes, but the impact was immediate. James's words, delivered with quiet dignity, resonated with millions. News outlets around the world ran clips of the soft-spoken sergeant who refused to call himself a hero, who deflected attention to others, who embodied the very values that Marcus had spat on. Social media exploded with support for James and condemnation for Marcus. Artists created illustrations of the incident, and highlighting the contrast between the composed guard and the arrogant tourist. Musicians wrote songs. The incident became a teaching moment in classrooms, a case study in business ethics courses, a sermon topic in churches. Marcus watched James's press conference from his new hotel room, a far less luxurious accommodation than he was used to. As he listened to the young sergeant speak with such humility and grace, something shifted inside him. For the first time, he truly saw what he had done. He hadn't just spat on a boot. He had spat on everything James represented: honor, duty, sacrifice, service. His whole life, Marcus had measured success by money and power. He had climbed over people to get to the top, had used his wealth as a shield against consequences, had convinced himself that being rich meant being better than others. But watching James speak, seeing the respect and admiration people had for this soldier, who probably earned a fraction of what Marcus spent on shoes, Marcus realized how hollow his own achievements were. He had money, yes. He had properties and investments and a luxury lifestyle. But what did he have that actually mattered? His daughter was ashamed of him. His ex-wife wasn't surprised by his behavior. His girlfriend had left him. His business associates were abandoning him. He had built an empire but had no kingdom worth ruling. For the first time in years, Marcus Pemberton felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel: shame. Real, deep, burning shame that no amount of money could wash away. The trial date was set for 6 weeks away. In that time, Marcus's lawyers would prepare his defense. So though they were honest about his chances, the evidence was overwhelming, the public sentiment was against him, and the British legal system didn't care how wealthy he was. James returned to his duties, grateful to escape the media attention and return to the routine of military life. But things had changed. Tourists at the palace looked at the guards differently now. They kept a more respectful distance. They hushed their children when they got too loud. The incident had reminded people that these weren't actors or entertainers. They were soldiers.